That night began like so many others, ordinary, quiet, forgettable. I was alone at home, wrapped in a silence that felt heavier than usual. The house seemed larger when no one else was there, every corner holding its breath. The lights were dim, not because I wanted romance, but because brightness felt unnecessary when there was no one to share it with. My partner was away, another trip, another excuse. We had grown used to these absences, even though they left behind a strange emotional echo, like a conversation paused mid-sentence and never resumed. I told myself I was fine with it. Independent, strong. But loneliness has a way of creeping in when you least expect it, disguising itself as calm. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling without really seeing anything. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking time in a way that felt almost mocking. Every sound seemed amplified, the hum of the fan, the distant bark of a dog, the faint noise of traffic far away. I checked the door twice, out of habit more than fear. I always did when I was alone. The neighbor crossed my mind briefly. He lived next door, someone I had seen countless times in passing. We had exchanged polite smiles, small talk about weather and parking. Nothing memorable, nothing threatening, just another face in the building. If anything, he blended into the background of my life, as harmless as the walls themselves. Still, there was an odd feeling in my chest that night. Not panic, just restlessness. I couldn't settle into the show playing on the TV. My thoughts drifted to things I avoided during the day, the growing distance in my relationship, the way I felt unseen even when I wasn't alone. I wondered when that started, or if it had always been there and I'd simply ignored it. I got up to get a glass of water, moving quietly through the house. The floor felt cool beneath my feet. I remember pausing in the hallway, listening. Nothing, just silence again. I laughed at myself under my breath, embarrassed by my own nerves. Back on the couch, I pulled a blanket over my shoulders. The night felt longer than usual, stretching out like it had plans of its own. I checked my phone once more, no messages, no missed calls. I considered going to bed early, hoping sleep would quiet my thoughts. Then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the rhythm of the house. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Pipes, wind, my imagination filling in gaps. But my body reacted before my mind could explain it away. My heart picked up speed. I held my breath, listening harder. There it was again, closer this time. I stood frozen, caught between curiosity and fear, unaware that this moment, this single pause in the quiet, was the last second of normalcy I would know for a very long time. The sound came again, sharper now, impossible to ignore. My chest tightened as I stood there, listening, trying to convince myself that fear was exaggerating something harmless. I took a slow step forward, then another, each movement feeling louder than it should have been. The house no longer felt like mine. It felt watched. Before I could reach the door, it opened. Not gently, not accidentally. The suddenness stole the air from my lungs. For a moment, my mind refused to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. A figure stood there, familiar in the worst possible way. It took a second too long to recognize him, not because I didn't know his face, but because my brain rejected the idea completely. My neighbor. I remember thinking there must be a mistake. That he would apologize. That this would turn into a misunderstanding I could laugh about later. But the look in his eyes told me the truth before his presence did. This wasn't confusion. This was intention. I tried to speak. No words came out. Everything after that feels broken into pieces, like memories shattered on the floor and never fully put back together. Time didn't move the way it normally does. Seconds stretched. Sounds blurred. My body reacted while my mind retreated somewhere far away, a place where this wasn't happening. I remember the weight of fear more than anything else. How it pressed down on me until I couldn't move. How my thoughts screamed while my body stayed silent. I remember staring at the wall, counting nothing, focusing on anything except what was unfolding in my own home. There was no room for choice. No space for control. When it was over, it ended as abruptly as it began. The absence of sound was deafening. The door closed again, leaving behind the same quiet as before, but it was different now. Polluted. Broken. I didn't move for a long time. I sat there, staring at the same spot on the floor, waiting for reality to return. When it finally did, it came with a wave of nausea and disbelief. I wrapped my arms around myself, not to comfort, but to confirm that I was still there. Still breathing. I checked the locks with shaking hands, even though I knew it was pointless now. The house felt unfamiliar, like I had been dropped into a place that only looked like home. Every shadow felt dangerous. Every sound felt like a threat. I went to the bathroom and washed my hands again and again, as if water could erase memory. The mirror reflected someone I barely recognized, eyes too wide, face too still. I didn't cry. Not yet. Shock had built a wall where emotion should have been. I returned to the couch as the night dragged on, waiting for morning like it was a rescue that might never come. I knew, even then, that something inside me had been permanently altered. That night didn't just take my sense of safety. It took my silence, and turned it into a burden I would carry alone. Morning came like it always did, slow, indifferent, unfairly normal. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, touching the same walls that had witnessed everything, as if nothing had happened at all. I sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, untouched by sleep. My body was exhausted, but my mind refused to rest. I told myself I would speak. That I wouldn't carry this alone. I rehearsed the words silently, over and over, shaping them into sentences that sounded strong in my head. But every version ended the same way, with fear tightening around my throat. When my partner returned days later, the house filled with familiar sounds again. Laughter, movement, questions about my week. I answered automatically, smiling at the right moments, nodding when expected. It felt like performing a role I no longer belonged in. They looked at me differently, I think. Or maybe I just imagined it. Trauma has a way of distorting perception, turning glances into accusations and silence into suspicion. Every time they touched my hand, my body stiffened before I could stop it. Every time they asked if I was okay, my heart pounded like a warning bell. I said I was tired. That became my excuse for everything. The neighbor didn't disappear. That was the cruelest part. I saw him in passing, at the mailbox, in the parking area, once even outside my door. He never spoke. Neither did I. But his presence felt loud, intrusive, like a reminder I couldn't mute. Each encounter sent my thoughts spiraling, replaying memories I wanted buried. At night, sleep came in fragments. I woke up gasping, disoriented, unsure where I was. My partner slept beside me, unaware of the storm just inches away. Lying there, listening to their breathing, I felt an unfamiliar guilt bloom in my chest. Not because I had done something wrong, but because I wasn't telling the truth. I began to understand something I had never considered before. Infidelity isn't always about desire or choice. Sometimes it's about silence, about carrying a secret so heavy that it builds a wall between you and the person you love. I was no longer fully present. Parts of me were missing, locked away in that night. My partner noticed the distance. Of course they did. Love notices absence faster than anything else. One evening, while we sat across from each other in the quiet kitchen, they finally asked the question I had been dreading. "You've been different," they said softly. Did something happen while I was gone? The room felt smaller, the air thick. I stared at my hands, at the tiny scar on my knuckle, at anything except their face. 1,000 answers rushed forward, each one competing for escape. The truth pressed against my lips. But fear was faster. I shook my head. "Nothing," I said. "I'm just tired." The lie settled between us, invisible but alive. And in that moment, I knew the secret wasn't just haunting me anymore. It was quietly reshaping everything I loved. Life didn't collapse the way I once imagined it would. There was no dramatic confrontation, no sudden explosion of truth that forced everything into the open. Instead, things continued, quietly, carefully, almost convincingly normal. And somehow, that made it worse. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I learned how to live around the memory instead of through it. I laughed when I was supposed to. I listened when my partner spoke. I showed up. From the outside, our life looked intact, stable, safe. But inside me, something had gone permanently silent. The neighbor eventually moved away. Or maybe I just stopped seeing him. I'm not sure which version hurts less. When his door finally stood empty, I felt a strange mix of relief and loss. Not loss for him, but for the part of me that had been holding its breath every time I stepped outside. Even his absence didn't give me peace. It only proved that the damage didn't live in him anymore. It lived in me. My partner tried. I have to give them that. They planned small surprises, asked gentle questions, reached for me in ways that once felt natural. I responded, but it was like touching the world through glass. I was there, but not fully. Some nights, I lay awake beside them, staring at the ceiling, wondering if love could survive what it didn't know. That was the cruel irony. The truth might have shattered us, but silence was slowly eroding us instead. I asked myself, over and over, if withholding the truth made me unfaithful in a different way. Not with my body, but with my honesty. Trust depends on presence, and I was only half present. The rest of me was trapped in that night, replaying moments I never chose but could never escape. There were times I almost spoke. Moments when the words hovered just behind my teeth, begging to be released. But fear always won. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of blame. Fear that once spoken, the story would no longer belong to me. So I carried it alone. Even now, there are nights when a sound in the house makes my heart race. When silence feels too loud. When I wonder how different my life would be if I had spoken sooner, or at all. I don't know if silence protected me or imprisoned me. Maybe both. What I do know is this: survival doesn't always look like healing. Sometimes it looks like endurance. Like learning how to breathe around a wound no one else can see. I never told anyone what happened that night. And sometimes, when I watch my partner sleep beside me, peaceful and unaware, I ask myself the question that still has no answer. Did staying silent save my life? Or quietly change it forever?